You get the impression these are all going to take a lot of paper. I'm getting that feeling myself. Okay, the first thing we can deal with here is the fact that this is an odd identity, and this that we have an odd identity for sine, and we have an odd identity for cosecant. So we can go ahead and use our odd identity for cosecant and realize that the cosecant of a negative angle is the same thing as the negative cosecant of a positive angle. Well, that negative will change this to a positive. So that's our odd even identities that I'm using here. And then I don't need that parenthesis probably to know that now that it's a positive instead of a negative. Okay, then we can do the same thing here with our odd identity. So I guess I'm kind of working on both sides this time just to get rid of those negatives to begin with. And I just made a mistake. Since this is odd, the sine of a negative angle is the same as the negative sine of the positive angle. Okay, so that should be negative. Alright, now that we have the odd and even identities out of the way, we probably should just choose one side of this problem and start working on it. The first thing I notice is on the left side of the problem, we have this thing here, which I recognize. You should start recognizing these identities. This one should be recognizable as cosine because of our Pythagorean identity. You know, we've got sine squared x plus cosine squared x equals 1. So therefore, cosine squared equals 1 minus sine squared. So that part right there can just be replaced with cosine. I think I want to go ahead and do that since I recognized that that is an identity. I'm going to go ahead and jump on that. At this point, I could try changing my cosecant to 1 over sine, or something like that. But I'm not sure exactly what to do with this, or I guess I could multiply by a conjugate. There's different things I could try. But I actually went over to the right side instead and started working on it on my notes here. So the first thing I noticed is that in this problem we kind of have a conjugate of this. Not quite, because this is sine and this is cosecant, but those two are related. So maybe if we multiply by conjugates, it will eventually lead us to this. So let's go ahead and try that. We did that in one of the other problems we did today. So let's multiply by the conjugate on the top and the bottom, which means we're multiplying by a value of 1. Okay, so for the conjugates on the top, we just FOIL that out. So 1 times 1 is 1, and negative sine t and positive sine t will cancel out, and then negative sine t times positive sine t is negative sine t, the whole thing squared, so we put the square there. Then on the bottom we have both a cosecant and this 1 plus sine t that we just multiplied by. Okay. Oh, look at that. That's recognizable again as this cosine part we just did a minute ago, isn't it? So let's go ahead and do what we just did here and change this to the cosine squared again. So we just barely did that. We know where that comes from. The next thing I'm going to do is distribute. So I'll have cosecant t times 1 is just cosecant t. And then cosecant t times sine of t will be plus cosecant t sine t. Now how did I know to distribute that? Sometimes when you get to a point where you're not sure where to go next, you just look for algebra you can do that you hope will actually get you somewhere. Another thing to obviously start trying is the fact that, or changing like our cosecants to sines and cosines maybe. Now notice how, since we want this side to match this side, we have a cosecant in the one we want it to match. So unless we change this one to a sine, we probably want to leave that as a cosecant. If you want to though, you could change them both to 1 over sine instead. But I'm just going to leave that for now so that it matches. But I'm going to go ahead and change this cosecant. So I'm going to have cosecant t on the bottom I'll leave that as is. Right now the top matches. The cosecant t on the bottom matches. I'm trying to figure out how to make that equal 1. It's going to be easier than you might think. Let's turn our cosecant into 1 over sine. And then we can multiply by sine over 1. And that cancels. There's our 1 that we wanted. I think I've got it. So, final match here. Cosine squared of t. And if I just trade these around, because that's perfectly fine, 1 plus cosecant t, and that matches exactly what we had there when we left off. So I think that works. So this is an example of how you can work on both sides and get them to a point where maybe you get stuck and don't feel like you can do anymore, and then work on the other side and try to make it match. You don't have to work on just one side of the problem. You can work on both sides to try and get to your goal, as long as you're, again, not working across both sides by multiplying both sides by something. If you work separately from one side to the other side in an attempt to get them to match, then that's perfectly good.